Sports Vision Windsor.
Good morning, everybody. We are here today with Nick Davenport. He is a speaker here this year at the ISFA Sports Combine of 2025. And we wanted to get together, talk some content, and talk about what Nick does, the type of work he's doing, and expose you to some of this stuff. So Nick is a sports vision trainer and mental performance coach. He works a lot with UFC athletes, various pro athletes, and D1 athletes. And one of the biggest things I want to start with is, so your Instagram tag is Mr. Mental Muscle.
Yep.
What is that? Tell us a little bit about what that is, what that does, and where that came from.
So like you mentioned, I worked in sport performance psychology. I worked in strength conditioning. So mental muscle was a term that obviously I didn't invent it. I heard it somewhere before, but it wasn't like a brand really anywhere, but the term existed because you think muscle, you build it up, strength, and then mental. Your brain adapts similar to a muscle, right? You put a load on it, it gets stronger, the connections get better. So mental muscle came from that first school of thought, but I actually started a fitness business right after undergrad, about a year after, and I was doing my master's in mental health counseling to be a therapist, and I had a neighbor who wanted me to train her, but I didn't have a business or nothing. So out of nowhere, I was like, okay, what should I call this? So a few days went by, like I started training her because it's like, why not just start making the money, even if I didn't have an LLC or I was like, whatever. I'll figure the name and brand out. So I was also working part-time at LA Fitness as a trainer and an assistant fitness director. And on my birthday, November 3rd, it was 2012. So I had an event there where they brought all these vendors. It was like food vendors, fitness, sports, energy drinks, and it had these girls who, I think it was called VPX, and they were taking pictures of all the employees. So they took a picture of me for their calendar or something or they were making a calendar, so they took a picture of me. And then she's like, oh, I'll tag you on Instagram. So I was like, what's Instagram? I literally, this is dating myself. Like we're out of whoever's watching, if you're under the age of 25, you're like, who wouldn't know Instagram? But for those who are younger, this wasn't a thing then. I think Twitter was definitely popping. Facebook still was kind of prominent in a different light, but Instagram was new. So I was like, what's Instagram? Oh, it's a site where you can post photos and stuff. I'm like, yeah, and it was just photos. So I was like, you remember that, right? Yeah. So I was like, okay. So I downloaded the app, and then I was like, okay, I need a name. So the mental muscle, I was like, okay, I was leaning towards that being the business, mental muscle fitness. So I was like, okay, how about I just call myself Mr. Mental Muscle? So cool. I forget her name. I think her name was Giselle. So I haven't seen her or talked to her since then. It was a random meeting. But basically, she got me on Instagram. And that moment I made Mr. Mental Muscle, it's been that same name ever since. So 2012 to now. So on the spot, it was just a thing to do because I needed an Instagram name and Mr. Mental Muscle, and then the business followed suit, Mental Muscle Fitness, which became Mental Muscle Performance, and eventually, I guess we'll get into, that became what now Mind.Body.1, which has been the brand since 2015.
Yeah, and here we are with all of that now. Great. So you do touch on it right there. So after Mr. Mental Muscle, you continue developing your tools and your strength programs and your conditioning programs, and you develop Mind.Body.1. Mind.Body.1, anybody who's been through our facility, you've played with these sticks. They're the red and yellow, blue and green sticks. You've looked at some of the charts. Some of these devices, this man right here invented them, created them. We've purchased them through him, and they're a huge integral part to our training services.
Appreciate that.
So explain Mind.Body.1 and where that comes from and where that is leading towards.
So that transition from mental muscle fitness to mental muscle performance came because my background, like I said, is in psychology. I got the fitness certification, but as you can see, I'm a go-getter, so I was like, I need to do something more. So I got something called the CSCS, which is the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist. So it's considered like, if you would say the PhD level of fitness training, that was it. But the problem was, at that time, I didn't have an exercise physiology background. So there's a big book like this thick called The Essentials of Strength and Conditioning. It touches everything a strength coach at the highest level would know for like an NFL team, a D1 team, whatever. It's like 800 pages. I read it from front to back twice. I forget how long it took me, maybe like 6 months. So I read it front to back twice, took the test, failed it by 5 questions. Because there's 2 sections, there's science foundations and the practical. The practical, I got a perfect score. Well, not perfect, but I got a passing score. But the science foundations, mind you, this is meant for people who have already had a bachelor's in exercise physiology. So I had none of that previous training other than what I taught myself reading that book. And I had a few study guides that I bought, so I missed it by 5 questions. I had to wait another, I think, 6 months to take it again. Then I passed it. So with that all going on, now I had the mental, now I had the muscle. So while I'm doing my master's in mental health counseling, I had a classmate who, her name was Nicole Smith. she said, hey, you're a former athlete, you like mental, you should do sports psychology. And just like the Instagram thing, I'm like, what's sports psychology? You would think, why would I not know this? Like, I like psychology. I went to school for undergrad. I was a D1 athlete, but I had no idea what a sports psychologist was. I didn't think about that. I knew mental was important, but there's actually a field for this. So the impulse of me said, I'm switching my major next semester to sports psychology. So I went from mental health counseling to sports psychology, but now we get in a car accident. I was fine physically for the most part. I might have got a concussion, but outside of the car being totaled, I was fine. So I had to take a year off. And then I ended up having a daughter, and I just started working like as a substitute teacher, then a full-time teacher. So everything went on hold for about 2 years. And then in 2015, I was laid off from that teaching job 3 months after my daughter was born.
Oh, wow.
I had basically no heads up. It was basically budget cuts because the school I was at had low funding. And basically I was put in a position of, what do I do now? So I went to work at Target as a stocker. So I'm unloading heavy boxes off trucks using my muscle, not my mental. And then I would listen to because it was overnight from like 1 a.m. to like 8 a.m. So no one's at the store. So I would be overnight unloading trucks, and then I would stock the toy aisle. So during that time, I would listen. Everyone could just listen to music, whatever. I'd be listening to podcasts, ebooks on neuroscience, mental performance, whatever. So I was getting my mind right doing that. So through 3-4 months, I'm like, I'm not going anywhere here because obviously this is not a career. I was applying to teaching jobs. I think I had 57 applications because Broward County, where I'm from, has over 300 schools between high school, middle, and elementary. 57 job applications, 10 interviews, 0 hires.
Wow.
So for like that whole period, a lot of rejection. So talk about mental toughness, and we talked about it in my workshop yesterday. Like I had to literally learn how to keep bouncing back from no. And they kept saying, you're too young, you're not enough experience. So I'm like, how am I supposed to get experience? You're not giving me a chance. I've already was doing the job. It's not like I'm coming from zero. So eventually I said, you know what, I need to just work on my business. So I went back to get my master's from a program online at Pennsylvania Western, and they had a good sports psych program. I looked up all the top online programs that are credentialed, and that was like the second one after I forget what the first one was. So I did that program. I have a newborn baby. I'm taking tests, holding her like this, feeding her with a bottle. I know you have children, so you understand this. I'm writing on a computer a paper or taking a test, and that was my master's for the most part. And then once I finished it, I went to the Target manager for the stock department and said, hey, I made a program there. It gets your physical, your mental. It's something we can do to warm up before we lift all these heavy boxes, mindset. And he loved it. His name was Mike. We called him Big Mike, who's like 6'5". And then he took it to the head manager, I forget her name, but she looked at it. It was like 2-3 pages, nothing crazy. She's like, oh, and handed it back. And at that moment, I'm like, yeah, I'm done here. I hate to say this, don't do this, kids at home. I just didn't come back the next day because it's like, they're not. I'm just a body here. Not saying I'm too good for it because I'm a type of guy like I'll do whatever it takes. And I was doing odd jobs outside of that. So then I applied at an addiction center to be a neurofeedback specialist. And I didn't really know what that was, but he trained me on. His name was Dr. Rick Harris. And while I'm going through all this, it all comes to Mind.Body.1 because I know that's what started this. So this is 2015. So Dr. Harris brings me on. He says, you have a master's in sports psychology. You're kind of overqualified for it. He's looking for like a 20-year-old who wants to make like $10 to $12 an hour. And this is 2015, so that's not horrible for a 20-year-old. Now, I don't think even a 10-year-old wants $12 an hour. So basically, he says, do you want this? I'm like, I just want to learn. So this neurofeedback stuff seems interesting. And then I'm working with a population I've never worked before because I come from the sport performance world. So I like a challenge. So he gives me the job, and he actually makes me his assistant as well. So I'm doing clinical intakes with people fresh out of detox. I'm doing personality assessments, I'm doing cognitive testing, and I'm doing neurofeedback. So I'm learning a lot of skill sets. And since he's the head psychologist, it's kind of like a doctor. The nurses do a lot of the in-between work, but the doctor has to do the diagnosis and all that. So I was doing a lot of that heavy lifting, but he was the one obviously running it. So I got so much experience from the clinical side of psychology. And then he said, hey, let's make a program where we have you do like workshops with like mental skills training, but also fitness. So you see where I'm going with this.
Ties it right back together.
So basically like, sure, I wrote a little overview. He's like, I like it. He went to his board, they approved it, but then they had some kind of audit for insurance and it got put on hold for about a year. So 2015, 2016. Mind you, I'm making $11 an hour with a now year-old baby.
Just grinding through it.
That's not paying the bill. So I'm doing side gigs, I'm doing training, I'm doing a little bit of mental consulting, which is not an easy gig to get clients for doing mental consulting, especially as an entrepreneur. So it's not crazy money. So I'm kind of struggling financially. So I got to the point where I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do because life is doing what life does, right? So I text Dr. Harris and I say, can we get that program going? Because I wrote a long text because we had that kind of relationship. I was like, car's about to get repoed. And at that time, me and her mom had broken up. I was just mentally, I was in a bad place. And he said, well, what do you want me to do? I just can't give you a bunch of money to fix your problems. Like, no, I don't want money. Give me the position that we were talking about a year ago.
Yeah.
And then I can just work for what I need, because this will be a higher position. So since I have a master, he said, okay, technically I can bill you as a therapist, because what you'll be doing will fall more into like more applicable stuff versus just neurofeedback, which is just 10 minutes of hooking up to this EEG headset, having you watch a movie and make sure you're in it was not grunt work, but it was a lower level skill. Yeah. This would be using my actual credentials. So I got paid basically the rate that the therapist, it was prorated because I was only doing maybe 15 to 20 hours a week, but it made up the difference from me doing more hours at the other position. So he had bought 3 more facilities, so this was perfect timing. So at this point, I was doing they call it the Mind.Body.1, or the Mind-Body connection. That's what he called it. So you see where it flows. So we did the Mind-Body connection for about 2 years. So now we're in 2017. Things going great. I'm getting back on my feet. I got a little small facility. I'm doing trainings there. I'm doing mental stuff. And I started doing some of the cognitive work. And then he starts having massive layoffs of all his 4 facilities. So I'm like, uh-oh, the chopping block. Yeah. And I made it through about 2 or 3 rounds of that. And eventually I get a call on the day I had to go in. And he was like, hey, Nick, I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to let you go. And I was like, you know what? I appreciate that, because you gave me a lot of opportunities and I saw it coming. The fact that I lasted that long between psychologists getting laid off, nurses getting laid off, and I think he did out of respect of my loyalty. I don't know, maybe whatever reason, I made it through all of that. But obviously, I understand as a business owner, you have revenue streams, you gotta make it make sense. So that's where Mind.Body.1 comes in. So around the same time, my great grandmother had passed and she had Alzheimer's. So now that I had the Mind-Body connection group, and then she passed, it started me thinking like, okay, I need to get back to my business. And I was like, what should I call it? So I had a friend, I was like, I have 3 names. I'll forget the 3rd name, but one name was Mind.Body.RX and one was Mind.Body.1, and the 3rd one I forget. But he's like, don't do Mind.Body.RX because it sounds medical, and this is not medical. So I was like, all right, then it's Mind.Body.1. And that's where Mind.Body.1 came from. So between the hardships of working at Target, working at the addiction center and learning all that stuff, and then my grandmother passing from Alzheimer's, is like, I need to make this a thing. That was the whole framework of putting the mental, the physical, making systematic ways to train these concepts. And sorry for the long story.
It's good. Like I said, door after door closes, something opens up, and then it leaves you here today. And something you touched on there, which is really important to know, is what you do, what we do, what a lot of these medical professionals or trainers or others are doing. It's not just sports. You mentioned at Target. You were developing this program to work at Target. It's your great grandmother had Alzheimer's. All these cognitive abilities you can utilize in many different facets and continue to build the mind, build strength in the mind, and get your mind and your body right, like you say all the time. So it's not just an athlete, and everybody has these motor skills functions that you need to continue to train and work on. So it's a really unique tie together with all that coming to there. So another thing I wanted to touch on is, anybody who follows Nick on Instagram, you'll see you do a lot of work with FitLight. Nick is a FitLight ambassador, has been for a few years now. That's how one of the biggest ways I know we first came to your page and saw what you were doing. We have FitLights in our facility as well. I guess, what's that relationship been like? How'd that come about? And where does FitLight really come into your program and what you do?
So it kind of, everything's almost sequential. Right after that segue from the addiction center to starting a Mind.Body.1 on paper, it was me getting now this equipment I would see online. And at the time, starting a small business, I didn't really have the revenue to be spending thousands of dollars. And there was different products on the lower end, higher end. So FitLight was kind of in the middle of the road. So eventually I reached out to them in like March of 2017. They gave me a quote and I kind of had to sleep on it because it's like, okay, I can't afford that right now. But I'm the type of person, like I said, right now. I wasn't like, this is too expensive, forget it. Because I see people who will comment on their page like, these are too expensive, I want them. But if you want anything in life, regardless of equipment, job, career, education, you're gonna figure out how to get it, right? So I was like, I just gotta figure out how to get this. So I need to make more money. That's my business mind. Like I always tell people, I had a friend, I was saying, you need to be good at business or good at your field or both. I said, I wanna be both. I wanna be Steve Jobs on this side, but Warren Buffett on that side. Like I need both sides. I can't just be one or the other. So basically with FitLight, I revisited and got a product called Blaze Pod. I know you probably heard of them. So they had a Kickstarter. So this is before they came out. So I found them by, I don't even know how I came across, but I bought the Kickstarter for $800 for 24 lights. And basically, since it was a Kickstarter, it sometimes doesn't get launched when it's supposed to. So this is nothing to them, but it took about 2 years for them to come because things just got changed. I think patent stuff, shipping stuff, because I think they're based out of Israel, even though they have a Miami location. So in that time frame, I made enough money to get FitLight. So I bought the FitLight system. And around the same week I got the system, I get introduced to Dustin Poirier, one of the top UFC fighters in the world. And the crazy thing about this, and I said this on other podcasts, I don't really know who he was because I didn't follow MMA at all. So I knew maybe Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, some John Jones, and he's definitely a staple name.
Oh, huge.
It's just like, if you're not into a sport, there's only certain names you're gonna know. So admittedly, when I met him, I was like, oh, I looked him up obviously and like, oh wow, he's legit. And the place I was at called American Top Team is full of top ranked fighters. They have like some of the most champions. So I knew what crowd I was in. But basically, I had got introduced to them like 2 weeks or a week and a half after getting a FitLight system. And an associate of mine, he was a strength coach at ATT. And he was like, you want to work with Dustin? And I was like, yeah, I was actually going to hit you up about working with your fighters. So he's like, come on in. And this is crazy. This story I've told a few times too. The day I met Dustin, Fox Sports was there with their camera crew doing a mini documentary for his fight coming up against Anthony Pettis. So that video is on my YouTube. So basically the first time I met this guy, world-class athlete, one of the best, and now people say arguably the best outside of a few other names, but he's in the top 10 for sure. I've never met this guy, and there's cameras all in my face, and I got this FitLight system. I think I have some grids. I might have Synaptech too.
The pressure's on right from the
Vector
start.
ball. So I have all these crazy tools that these people have never seen, and this guy has never done it with me ever. And the world's looking at me. So talk about pressure, right? But you wouldn't tell because I like to practice what I preach, mental muscle. So we shot that. It goes out on November, I think, 5th. I tell everyone on my Instagram, Facebook, every platform, watch this. So I have all my friends from high school, college, like, oh my God, you work with Dustin Poirier? Some people who follow it's like, what? That's one of my favorite fighters. So I'm like, dang, this is big. So FitLight happens to see it, and they reach out to me, and we meet at a conference in Orlando called FIBO. It's like a fitness conference. And then Rob, one of the co-owners, and he's a sales director, he sees me walking in a box. He's like, oh, that's Nick Davenport. He's like, hey, I'm Rob, I'm from FitLight. And then we just start talking, and that's where it started. And then they came to my facility maybe a month later, and we sat down, did some drills, and that's what opened the door. And then within a year or so, they asked me, hey, we want to start an ambassador program, and we think you'd be a perfect fit. So I got to be the first. They've had several after me, but I got to be the inaugural one. And then it became more than just an ambassadorship. I could say some of it became part consulting, but then it just became part like family, where they would like be open to suggestions and like treat me as like a family member, like, because in the day it's still business, but it's cool when you can like talk to people as a person, you know, versus like, we need this, we need that. I had deadlines and stuff, that's cool, but at the same time, I wasn't just a person trying to help them make money. And that's why I think now almost, I'll be 2017, so 8 years this year, and I think September 8 years, we're still connected. I did an event with them on Thursday, helping them out, and I did my own yesterday, but you can see obviously the relationship is still there. Some companies I've worked with, you don't really see them on my page, no hard feelings, but it didn't last because it wasn't the same dynamic. And I found myself in some situations being a tool, which personally, I don't have a big ego, but that's why I draw the line. I don't ever want to be like, I'm just doing this like your bulldog guarding your house. Like, no, I'm here to help. Let's be a team, not, oh, Nick has some cool drills, some cool clients. Once it becomes that, I start peeping in and I'm like, I don't really want to be here for that. So with them, it never was that.
It's a partnership.
They put me in so many opportunities. That's why I'm grateful for them too on their side. I've helped them obviously, but they put me in opportunities to work with other world champions. I got to do a commercial for a video game. It's called Rainbow Six. Have you heard of it? So it's like a shooting special ops game. And you know who Demetrius Johnson is? I do not. So he's, put it like this, when you name John Jones, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, he's somewhere in between those names. So he is a big gamer. He goes by Mighty Mouse. That's his fight name, and that's his gamer tag. So they did it was called Athlete versus Gamer. So there's this big YouTuber named Zach TTG and Mighty Mouse going head to head on different tasks. Some fighting, some video game, some mental cognitive, and FitLight was used in the video, and I was just there to consult. So I was behind the scenes. So they're like, hey, you talk pretty well about this. Will you want to be on camera? And them not knowing I've done many on camera. So I'm like, of course. I'm thinking like exposure. So the funny thing is, I thought it was going to be a few sentences here and there. It turned in out of the 10-minute video, because it was like a commercial / mini doc. Out of 10 minutes, I think like 3.5, 4 minutes, I was on screen. Oh, wow. So I got a big tie-in. So I got to work with a video game. I didn't really play shooting games like that, but I played Rainbow Six in the past when I was a kid. So it's like surreal to know I'm with world champions, video game commercial with a company that's like a huge company, and it's like the opportunity came from FitLife. So that's why I think in general, any relationship is when both sides can help each other,
For sure.
not one or the other.
Yeah, Rob and his team's been great, even for us. Again, if you've been through our facility, you've seen the FitLights, you've worked with them. They were actually the first tool we purchased when we were opening up, and we were beta testing out of our garage, because many of you know we started in our garage with some synthetic ice and some turf in the back and a set of FitLights, and that was really how we started rolling everything. And they've been a great partner from day one for us as well. So that's a really cool story there. So last question I have for you is, so your integration of mental performance and sports vision training. So obviously one goes with the other. They're not independent by any means. They tie together a ton. Same with us. That we had mental performance coaching direct in our facility. You do it yourself. You tie them both together and really work to build the two disciplines and make sure that you are having, again, I use the term, I've heard you say it so many times, get your mind right, get your body right. When the two of them link, everything clicks together and you become the best athlete you can be. So maybe if you can just touch on a little bit of, what does that mean? Like, what is getting your mind and your body right? What is the benefit of being strong mentally and strong physically with your vision of everything together, and how is it all tying in?
Yeah, so like you said, it goes hand in hand, and I know it's cliche, the body does what the mind, or the body follows the mind, and while it's cliche, it's the truth. And then when we come to the vision part, a lot of people don't know this, obviously we do, but the vision is a big part of how our body works, and beyond just seeing, our balance, our coordination, how we can make sense of the world around, proprioception, all that good stuff. So when you talk about the mind, you can't do without talking about the vision. But at the end of the day, we only care about the vision and the mind, like I said in my workshop, for goal-directed behavior. Because me picking up this cup, there's a lot of factors, as minute as it is as a movement in just general life. That's why let's go into I'm all over the place, but like robots, when they pick up a cup, it's
very sequential, purposed.
They can get it close, but they cannot get it like we do. Then, like I said in my workshop, that's what makes humans so unique. We can manipulate the world way different than animals, way different than machines, even though both have amazing either strength or coordination, but not in the sense that how we can. So going back to how it all integrates, if I can see it and perceive it and put myself in the right space, get there, my eyes there, and then my mind can be in the right frame of thought of cognitive function of this is what I need to do, or this is what I don't need to do, and then end it with whatever that outcome goal was. That's what literally any performance is, whether it's sport, whether it's shooting, because I work with tactical, whether it's active aging. Okay, where's my keys? It may seem minute, but these are things we have to do every day. So when I do my training, my framework of thought is always, like I say, an umbrella of, okay, goal-directed behavior, but how do we get there? Some people is more so the psychological, mental side. I have trouble with the stress or anxiety or whatever it is, so that's going to cloud everything else. But say they're fine with that. Some people are great in that side, but they're cognitive, they just can't process like they need to. Or physical, they can't move like they need to. So it's one or the other, sometimes all three. So that's why my training, in a session, people say, what could it look like? And I always say it depends, not to be extra, but it's like, some people really don't need to work on the movement stuff with me. Like I have athletes where I will not touch anything on the physical side at all. There's some where I'll have a little bit, but it won't be to the magnitude of strength and conditioning. But I have some where strength and conditioning, since I have a strength coach background, I will do that stuff and then integrate the mental or cognitive or visual stuff, where the session might be them doing their regular sets and reps on the strength conditioning, but a superset, instead of saying people doing chest press and push-ups, that's a good superset. So let's say chest press or bench press, push-ups, and then a grid drill where they're scanning, finding the numbers. Simple as that. But now they're getting all three, and that could be a session. Or I have someone that's only the mental skills, where the only thing we're doing is the mindset stuff. Now, I very rarely do purely mindset. I might still throw in some cognitive, because I'm a big proponent of that's helping, like I said yesterday, that's like your bench press, that's the capacity. So if you're going to be mentally tougher, you need to have the cognitive capacity, like that excerpt I read. I know it was a long excerpt, but I wanted to read it because that article as a whole, but that specific section quantifies in words exactly what, when people say, what do you do? That's it. Getting the cognitive behavioral side, which facilitates the cognitive function, which facilitates how you perceive and react to things, which is really what emotional control and regulation is. And then I can do all the other stuff.
It's like the perfect Venn diagram. You have your
Yeah.
physical, your mental, and your visual, and where you can meet in the middle to tie all that stuff together is how you become the best version of yourself and the best athlete you can be.
That's literally my philosophy. You can't have one or the other, because like I said, I practice what I preach. I pride myself on, I don't want to just be the fittest. I don't want to just be the most mentally tough. I don't just want to be the most visually accurate. I want to be all of that.
Yeah.
Now, will there be higher levels on some? Sure. I may not be the strongest, but I guarantee you my level of strength is beyond standard, or my level of cognition is beyond standard, because no one can be best at everything. Like I say, jack of all trades, master of none. I hate that saying because there's more of it. I forget the exact phrase, but it's like, it's better to be a master of some than a master of none.
Yeah.
I think that's it. But that's how I look at it, because let's use my own athletic career. When I played football, I wasn't the fastest, but I ran 4.4 speed. That's still pretty fast. There's 3 or 4 guys on my team that ran 4.3. They could dust me, but I'm still in the mix.
Yeah.
Then strength-wise, I benched maybe at that time in high school. I used high school because I was getting recruited by teams. It was like I could bench maybe 240, which is not out the park, but as a 17, 18-year-old, that's pretty legit. I could squat 350.
Yeah.
So it's like I was always in the mix. Now, some things like jumping, that was my thing. I could jump.
Yeah.
Like I was a long and triple jumper. I had a 37 vert. So it's like, these are things like I excelled at, but I still could run. And that's why colleges wanted me, because, and I was the same height. I wasn't as heavy. I'm 220 now. I was like maybe 190, 185.
Yeah.
So it was like, college was like, oh, this guy can fit in a lot of places.
Very
That's
dynamic.
what got me looks. But anyway, so that's why my framework as a business makes sense for me, because I lived it. I was that jack of all trades, and that's literally what I talk about in some of my courses. Like, find the thing you're optimal or maximal at, but then find the things you can be optimal at.
Yeah.
It's no one or the other,
Of course.
at least for me.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate you sitting down with us today. Again, check out Nick on Instagram, Mr. Mental Muscle. Check out his products, Mind.Body.1. Reach out to us if you have any other questions, and we'll hopefully do some more of these and get some more info together and some more future sit-downs like
If I
this.
can make it out to you.
Yeah.
So the office is in Windsor.
Yeah, we're in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, right across from Detroit. And our big focus is hockey, obviously, being in Canada. So it's really cool talking to other people that work in a lot of other sports and disciplines and tying this all
So
together.
maybe I can make an appearance on that side one day.
Come on down.
I've never been to Canada, so.
We'll have you at any time.
All right.
Awesome.
All right,
Thanks, man.
thank you.
Have a good
Thank
one.
you.
Sports Vision Windsor.